continuing this discussion throughout the day. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Jonathan. Really interesting to get the global perspective there. Right, we'll have a chance when we get the panel up here to have a bit of a conversation later on. But next up is Heather. Heather Ward, join us up here. Here's your click. Don't trip, no, please. There's your clicker.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. How are you today? I'm going to... I'm going to start today with a little bit of background, talking about some of the information, or actually the lack of information that we have in this area. And I apologise in advance for what may seemingly be a disjointed presentation, but that is because it is disjointed, and I will do my best to bring some of it together. Obviously, it's accepted. It's one of the riskiest things that activities that happen in the course of work is to be driving in the course of work. And these are the unacceptable statistics that we have. The lower one is an estimation that Bruce Wharton and I made by looking at the data, and I'll come back to that in a little while. And we estimate that up to 39% of pedestrians are killed by somebody who is driving for work. There's a very high risk in occupational driving, and perhaps I can help Jonathon here with his 1.2% of transport accidents reported by the HSE. I won't talk about the HSE because we can be here all day if we do that. They are only responsible for accidents, transport accidents and deaths that happen off the highway. And these are all ones that happen in facilities like logging facilities, big construction areas, and tank farms and the rest. But what this shows us is that driving is more dangerous to other people than the occupational side. And this data is old because DFT no longer gives us, helpfully, the information that we need. We have to ask for it or look in detail for it, which is not very helpful to those of us in the room who may want to have a quick look at it. We have to sort of delve in. But it's clear that working drivers pose more risk to other people than do anybody in any of the other occupations. And this is just a little illustration of that. And the light blue bars on the left-hand side, the medium-sized ones, are those who are killed, seriously injured or slightly injured of a driver driving for work. The very pale ones are their passengers, and the dark blue lines are the ones where somebody driving for work has actually killed somebody that is outside of the vehicle, whether it be a pedestrian, another vehicle occupant, or whatever. But it's it just shows you the extent of the problem. Now, then we want to be clear, really, what is a work-related journey, and it's where a driver uses a vehicle in the course of their work. Now, then, this vehicle can be privately owned, it can be owned by a company, it can be leased, but it's a vehicle that is used for work. And working refers to the driver. Now then, we often see statistics quoted where the fact, for example, let's take a works bus or a school bus or any kind of bus, for example, it's the passengers that are cast as being working. And one of these, but it's not, it's the driver that's working, because it's the vehicle and it's the driver. The passengers are the collateral damage of that driver working. And it happens also, it involves the taxis and the private hire. I've separated them out. By taxi we mean the hackneys and the Ubers. And also if you're giving a lift to school or work to somebody, it is what the driver is doing, not what the passenger is. Now then, we, as Jonathan was saying, commuting, we in this country separate out commuting. And I'm not going to talk about commuting today. Commuting itself actually is quite a difficult one, and Jonathan gave us a very good description of what it means. I've just shortcut it, saying it means driving from home to a driver's normal place of work. Now then, the tax side of this, because people can claim money back from on their tax if they're using their vehicle for work but not for commuting. And so the tax take on this is that you are commuting if you are driving to your normal place of work. And a normal place of work, say you're travelling every day to a construction site, and it's a big construction site. Take, for example, it's one of the HS2 construction sites and you're driving there every day. If you are driving there every day for up to 2 years, that is still counts as commuting. Once you get over 2 years, it counts as, for tax purposes, a permanent place of work. So it's not quite that straightforward as somebody just getting in the car and going down the road to the office or to their normal place of work. What sort of vehicles are driven in the course of work? Well, all kinds of vehicles can be driven in the course of work. Goods vehicles, the under 3.5 tonnes you can drive on an ordinary car licence, and if you are old enough you can drive up to 7.5 tonnes on a car licence as well. But now that's changed. For all new drivers have to pass a separate test to drive over 3.5 tonnes. It's one of the reasons why there's so many under 3.5 tonne vehicles on the road, because they're not regulated. Once you get to 3.5 tonnes, you're highly regulated by the system. You have to have a separate licence, you have to have checks on your health and your vision, and it's altogether a different type of licensing. And the goods vehicles, especially the over 3.5 tonnes, are seldom privately owned, very seldom privately owned. Public transport vehicles, of course, you've got the small buses and the large buses, private hire, taxis of all types, which I said. Vehicles designed to serve a particular purposes. They're your ambulances, your heavy plant, your refuse collection, and all the other sorts of vehicles that you see on the road. Those are all vehicles that people drive for work. Agricultural vehicles, mopeds and motorcycles, we're seeing a lot of those, especially with the gig economy, delivering food and parcels, and the couriers have been on our roads for many, many years, but there's been an explosion in home delivery. And then privately owned vehicles, cars and vans, and we have a little bit of a problem in estimating which of those are actually working. Now then, I'm going to talk more about vans because they are a growing group. They are growing phenomenally quickly, and as you can see from this slide, there were 3.82 million of them in 2022 compared with 2.79 in 2012. That's a huge increase in the number of these. About half of these vans on the road are registered to private individuals. They're not company owned, they belong to private individuals, and the men registered outnumber the women by 10 to 1. So there are very few women registered as owners or keepers of these vans. These are the under 3.5 tonne. Now then, over the last decade, and especially since COVID, there's been a huge rise in self-employment and small and medium enterprises. And this is where the big increase in the vans have been. The other half are registered to companies, and we'll be hearing a lot about company, but I just want to bring to your attention only half the vans on the road are registered to companies. The others are individuals. And the biggest user of vans is the construction industry, and that's the people who are builders, scaffolders, brickies, you name it. I want to talk a little bit about traffic levels because there's been a large, during the COVID months, and it seems like years, there was a huge reduction in the amount of traffic on the road. And that was because construction was shut down, accommodation was shut down, food services were shut down, all sorts of things were shut down. And this means that the number of vans and the number of HGVs on the roads reduced tremendously. And during this period, the van traffic reduced by anything up to, it dropped to about 35 to 40% of its pre-COVID levels. And although it went up again once the construction industry started working again, that's one of the first ones to start work again after the COVID. But last month, the DFT is still producing these statistics. The van mileage on its roads that it's got the traffic counters, it's 114% of its February 2020 levels. So that again is showing us where there's a big increase. The HGV traffic has recovered. But the interesting thing is the car traffic is nowhere near recovered. It's still about 93% of what it was before COVID. And then where do these vehicles drive? And I think this is an important one to give us a little bit of an idea about the vans, is that the vans are, there's a lot of vans on our minor, rural and urban roads, as you can probably expect, especially if they're doing deliveries. We can't separate out the car and the taxi, but we can assume that the light vans are working, and of course the HGVs are working. So this is the working traffic that is circulating on our network. One of the things that we're always trying to do is to estimate the number of collisions involving working drivers. All the information that we have easily to hand is all traffic, all cars, all vans. But there is, within the Stats 19, which is where the casualty statistics are held, it does distinguish working journeys from commuting journeys and school runs. But it is not a very good way of only 60-something% of records are, well, most of them are unknown, which is a huge, great problem for us. So Bruce and I sat down and thought, well, how can we do better than this so that we can help people understand how to interpret these statistics? And we think that, and now this is sort of, well, we do have basis for our assumptions that large vehicles are designed for work purposes. So all your HGVs, all your agricultural vehicles, and everything that you think of is a working vehicle is actually working. No matter what Stats 19 says, you don't commute in your lorry or your bus, you don't take the kids to school in it, and you don't go on private journeys in your HGV. Now, the taxis and private hire are a different kettle of fish. Many of those are recorded as commuting, but they're not actually commuting. That's what their passengers are doing. The drivers are actually driving for work. A taxi doesn't go to the same place every day. Well, very, very rarely. Most of them go from home to pick up their first job. So we assume that all the taxis that are recorded as commuting are working. So when you're looking at the journey purpose, that's one of the ways of looking at it. And small vans, say, used by trades or deliveries, again, they're rarely used for commutings, and we, again, are assuming that they're driven for work. We assume that 81% of the mileage of vans is working, and 12.6 of the mileage of cars is working. So, we still don't know well, we still don't know. We need to understand who is working, driving or riding, and how much and on what types of road. And we need to know who is injured by a working driver. We know who is injured, we know which roads vehicles travel on, but we don't know which of these are working. And if we're going to try to reduce the toll of work-related casualties, this is what we want to do. We know nothing about the number of gig workers delivering food, parcels, whether it be motorbike, bicycle, car or a van. We don't know how many of them there are. We've got no idea. And that number fluctuates, and of course, since COVID, we've all got very keen on having home deliveries, and so there's much more of this small short trips on our local residential roads where people are walking. We don't have an accurate number of cars in the grey fleet, and the grey fleet is the ones where people get reimbursed for their mileage for working on company business. You either have a company car where the company pays everything except your private mileage, or you have a car where you claim expenses for it, and that is the grey fleet. And we don't know how big this is, and we don't know how it's changing over time. We don't know the current percentage of van mileage that's work-related. So many of the people that come to your door with their van to deliver, that's their only vehicle because they can't afford a van and a car. So the van doubles as their private car as well as their working car. Again, we're not very clear on what the proportion is of the van mileage. We used to have a much better idea because DFT used to do studies, but they don't anymore. And there's no data at all on the numbers of motorcycles or mopeds that are being used for work. I'd just like to leave a little bit. Why do they matter? And these are some of the reasons it matters. It matters to the employers for the reasons that we have, and it matters to the drivers as well, that we want to improve the But I do want to, for us to hold in our memories during the course of today that half of the vehicles on the road that are working do not belong to a company. So the other half we can do something about, but the real trick is how do we get at the individual drivers, and that I think is one of the holy grails. Right, thank you very much, and again I'd like to acknowledge the impact of funding from National Highways and from Adrian here for his huge support in getting this work going, and obviously to Nicola and to Bruce, my co-authors. And we did a lot of stakeholder research, and the report that is referenced at the beginning has all of this information in. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks very much, Heather. Now, we were hoping to have Mark Cartwright here, but unfortunately I think he's had to have some surgery. So I think Mark is joining us on a pre-record. So let's see.
My name's Mark Cartwright. I'm Head of Commercial Vehicle Incident Prevention at National Highways. Please, first of all, accept my apologies for not being able to join you personally this morning. I had a minor operation on my nose on Thursday, which turned out to be a little bit less minor than was anticipated, so I've been advised against travelling. So I hope this recording will help get our message across with you. So again, please accept my apologies. Where we're starting from with this is, I'm sure you're all aware that we have ambitious targets to reduce harm on our roads. We're also very conscious that to achieve those aims, we will need support, we will need help. We know that we can do what we're doing now, and we won't achieve our ambitions. To be frank, we know that we could probably do 10, maybe even 100 times more of what we're doing now, and we'd still struggle to meet our ambitions. So we need different, and that different, frankly, is the support of operating industries and fleets around the country of all sizes, of all shapes. And why we say that is at-work drivers are key for us achieving our ambitions. They're key for a couple of main reasons. Number one, just the numbers. There's a direct effect. If we can find a way of influencing the choices and decisions and behaviours that drivers at work are making, we'll go a significant way towards reaching our targets. We also know that there's a significant degree of osmosis across drivers. So again, if we're influencing at-work drivers, hopefully those positive safety messages will also cascade to their peers, their friends, their families, etc., etc. In terms of numbers, I think it's interesting to try and get a handle on the level of effect that this could have. The recording of journey purpose is at best sporadic with incidents on our network or indeed any of our roads. So we can't really rely on that to a great extent. So we had an idea a while ago, I'll share with you, that we could maybe freeze a mile of motorway and go and start knocking on people's windows to work out why they were on our road, were they there for work purposes. Now, clearly there were many, many reasons we couldn't actually do that. So we started at the other end of the equation, really, I guess. We looked at vehicle registration numbers. We know that broadly there's about 500,000 trucks registered in the UK. A bit more than that, but let's keep the arithmetic easy. We know that there's getting on for 5 million vans registered in the UK. That gives us 5.5 million vehicles, I think we'd all agree, are typically used for at-work purposes. You then get into the world of company cars and grey fleet. There's around about 800,000 traditional company cars in the UK, taking us to 5.8 million vehicles and drivers that should be influenceable. You then look at grey fleet. There are wildly varying estimates on how many grey fleet vehicles are on our roads, anywhere between 10 and 25 million I've seen reported in estimates. So we took around about 14 million as being a very conservative figure, and rather conveniently that brings our total to around about 20 million. And again, that's useful because there's broadly about 40 million vehicles registered in the UK, so I think we could argue for at least 50% of the vehicles out on our roads we ought to be able to influence driver behaviours and driver choices. And it's probably even more than that. If we went and took ourselves down to our favourite bit of motorway, favourite trunk road now, where are we getting on for 11 o'clock on a Monday morning, on a works morning, I'm sure we'd see that it'd be way more than 50% of those vehicles are there for work purposes. So it's a fantastic opportunity, it's a massive lever that we potentially have got at our fingertips through health and safety at work legislation, employee responsibilities, etc. We're running our second road risk event at the National Space Centre on Thursday of this week, and there's a little bit of video we've commissioned, so you're getting a sneak preview of this, guys, just to try and get this message and start the conversation about the ability that at work we have to influence the behaviours of at-work drivers. So let me just share this little bit of video. It will be available on our drivingchange.info website if anybody's interested or wants to look at the materials from last year's event. So let me just play the video.
Yes, you join me now on the bridge just above what can only be described as an horrific crash, which the emergency service...
While there were multiple vehicles involved or affected by the incident, we're going to focus on two drivers, Gina and Slobodan. Gina works for a vending machine supplier. She's on the road more often than not. Her manager expects her to take business calls while she's driving. Slobodan works as a facilities technician. He covers multiple sites nationwide. He likes to do everything himself, so regularly dashes from site to site. Coincidentally, Slobodan's company uses vending machines supplied by Gina's company. How the incident unfolded. The police determined that Gina drifted across her lane, overcorrected, and lost control, ending up in lane 4 of the motorway. Her loss of control was attributed to her being distracted by an incoming business call from her manager. Telematics in Slobodan's vehicle records him travelling at 80 miles an hour in the moments before the crash. He was unable to slow to avoid colliding with Gina's swerving car. He continued onwards after the initial impact, hitting a lorry further up the road. The incident left Gina with light injuries, resulting in a couple of weeks off work. Identified by the police using her phone illegally at the time of the collision, she received 6 points and a driving ban due to totting up. Gina is still working for the vending machine company and hopes to be back on the road once her ban is served. Slobodan suffered life-changing injuries in the incident. Despite ongoing rehabilitation, he's been medically retired by his company, and it's likely he will struggle to make ends meet. Slobodan's injuries were made worse by both his unsafe speed and unsecured equipment in the back of his van. Neither Gina's or Slobodan's employer had a robust driving for work policy. Repercussions. Aside from the physical, mental and financial impacts on the drivers involved, there were far-reaching consequences for their employers.
From a chief executive standpoint, an incident like this has major repercussions across the business. From the emotional impacts on colleagues to potential disciplinary action or even criminal proceedings that I could face. It's likely that damage has been done to our reputation, both for our customers and our suppliers, with the inevitable financial implications that brings. And what happens next? Will the HSE get involved? Will the police charge the driver? Someone who works here? Me? The incident was very serious and someone could have died. I need to ask myself and my entire business if we could have prevented this. Did we make mistakes? Did I make mistakes? And what must we all do to prevent it happening again? I need to show leadership.
As an operational manager, my first thoughts, of course, are with the people directly involved. An incident like this leads me to ask questions of myself and my team that I need to be sure about. Are the drivers well trained and practicing the right behaviours? Are their schedules reasonable? Were and are our vehicles roadworthy? Are the MOTs and servicing up to date? Have I got the evidence to back this up? I need to be confident all my records are in order. Am I doing my job properly?
The incident has certainly raised some issues and questions for me as Health and Safety Manager. Beyond investigating what happened, I need to ensure that the relevant responsibilities sit with the right people or teams and they know what to do. I'll need to review our driving for work policy, if we have one. Our processes too. How is this not RID or reportable? When something happens, is it even being reported? What about our near misses? We must treat our driving risk as seriously as we do other risks in our business and investigate properly. I make regular recommendations to the board. I need to be confident they're being acted on.
As a HR manager, I'm concerned about our people. How are they? Do they need support? And their colleagues too. It's very upsetting for all of us, and of course their families. Because of this crash, I've got key people off the road, and no doubt I'll need to recruit cover or move people around. There'll be a cost to this, and I just haven't got the budget. I think we've got the correct policies and procedures in place, but whose responsibility is it to check they were being followed in the lead up to the incident? Is it mine? I need to be confident everybody understands their responsibilities.
The finance and procurement team are always under pressure, and we're strapped for cash. The cost of this incident could escalate quickly. We talk about safety being our priority. Can we afford to put our money where our mouth is? There's a vehicle to replace quickly. I don't know where that money's coming from. Do we buy cheapest or buy safest? If we're to blame in some way, there might be a compensation claim or a fine coming our way. I need to be confident we're a demanding client and our suppliers take road safety as seriously as we do.
It's been a trying time since the incident for us in comms and marketing. The phones and the email have been blowing up. We're a national company, a household name, and we employ a large number of people. So the press were all over the story, and our logo and name have been cast in a very poor light in the media. We're working tirelessly to minimise the damage and assure the general public, our customers, suppliers, and importantly, our employees that lessons are being learnt and change for the better is underway.
What if we changed one behaviour for each driver? If Gina had not felt obliged to answer the business call, it's likely she would have been paying more attention to her driving and the road ahead. She wouldn't have drifted across her lane and lost control of her vehicle. If Slobodan had been driving at a safe speed, he'd have had more time to react. Any impact would have been less severe, resulting in less severe injuries, and a reduced number of vehicles being caught up by the incident further along the road. What next? Both companies investigate the incident and identify gaps, including the lack of a robust driving for work policy, not properly managing driving risk as a health and safety issue, the importance of driver roadworthiness as well as vehicle roadworthiness, and Slobodan's organisation failing to manage safety of their suppliers and contractors. In the aftermath of the incident, both Gina's and Slobodan's companies recognised the need for change, their responsibilities, and their power to influence not only their own workforce, but that of their suppliers and contractors.
We've learned a hell of a lot from this awful incident.
We've learned a lot about our failings and taken steps to address them.
We're confident we're in a better place now.
But how confident are you?
How confident are you that you have the right road risk management policies in place?
Are you that your road risk management processes and systems report to the board?
That your incidents on the road are properly reported, recorded, and investigated?
To you that weaknesses in your road risk management are identified and addressed?
If you had to do just one thing, what would you do?
Guys, I hope you found that interesting and positive, and look at my inability to run a slide deck properly, so do forgive me on this. The messages that we really wanted to pull out of this is that, number one, it's personal. Of course it's personal. These are people's lives that we're talking about here. But we all have a superpower. Those of us in a corporate role, our organisations, all have a superpower to influence choices and the behaviours of at-work drivers. The levers are already there through health and safety legislation. There's clearly a legal as well as a moral and financial obligation, imperative to be doing stuff. I also want to challenge our acceptance of poor driving behaviours. We identified a couple of significant issues in that video around the causation of the incident, and also the individual that came off worst in the incident. Slobodan's speed was clearly an issue. We see an awful lot of organisations who've invested in telematics equipment but don't routinely seem to monitor their drivers' speed. There's a whole piece around the reduction of speed in these kind of incidents. Many of you will be aware that you don't lose speed in a linear fashion. It's more exponential and related to the square of the speeds that are involved. But to cut a very long story very short, all things being equal, in the time that it took Gina to slow down from 65 mile an hour to 0, Slobodan would probably still have had an impact speed of getting on for 50 mile an hour, which clearly will be life-changing. Clearly there's the obvious thing about Gina's distraction and her management requiring her to be on her phone when she's out there driving, and again it's that lack of acceptance of just how dangerous driving is for many of us. Unless you're into bobsleighing or base jumping or something, it'll be easily the most hazardous thing that we do on a regular kind of basis. We've also got the recognition that maybe health and safety colleagues don't take at-road risk quite as seriously as they do other risks in their organisation. I've seen many examples of this over the years where extremely health and safety robust organisations simply don't seem to get that the on-road activity is just as much part of their health and safety responsibilities, not least from a legal point of view. And I don't know, I have a suspicion that the lack of the need for road incidents to be reported to HSE via the RIDDOR process may be quite a component in that complacency. And at the end of the day, this is absolutely a health and safety issue. So my call to action, my ask for you here today is to go back to your organisations and make sure and ensure that you're managing the health and safety obligations that your organisation has, both corporately and individually, as well out on the road as you are within your organisations. So we need you to take this information back to your organisations, to recognise the risk, recognise your legal and moral obligations, and please recognise your superpower. Between us, we really can make a change, and it's personal. My contact details are there. Please don't hesitate to get in touch. We're very happy to share our videos with you to use within your organisations if you feel that would be appropriate. Okay, please enjoy the rest of your day, and again, my apologies for not being able to join you in person.
Okay, thanks very much for that and for that video to make us all think. Can I invite members of the panel to come up and join me, including Kate, who's not on the screen for reasons but that Jamie will explain later, no doubt. So please join us up here. So reflecting on some of that, I mean, Tavid, I thought I'd start with you at the beginning because after a weekend when we saw National Highways complete a possession of the most busy road in the country 8 hours early, has the railway actually got anything to teach us at all in this area?
Well, the railway is a very closed environment. I think in some ways we're quite lucky, but I think one of the earlier speakers mentioned the fact that, you know, if we had the number of plane crashes or the number of train crashes, would we be behaving the same way? We do, and we have. I think over the years we've had some quite horrific train crashes, and that's allowed us as an industry to really understand and focus on risk. And I think one of the things we've been recognising is that the railway industry only survives by the highway that surrounds it. As if on cue.
For those of you dialing in, we're all very much enjoying the fact that the fire alarms in this building are working.
So I think we only recognise that the railway only survives on the basis of how we support it through the highway, and I'll be covering a little bit of that later on. But I think we have, and we bring an awful lot, I think, to the highways now. We have very mature systems for managing risk. And of course we have the Rail Accident Investigation Branch, which has allowed us to really examine and look at train crashes in detail to understand why they happen.
Okay, quick check here. Show of hands, who thinks we should have a road collision investigation branch? That's good, because if you haven't put your hand up...
We have one. We have one. We just don't know what they do.
Road Safety Investigation Branch, but not road accident. Got that, okay. Which is good, because if you haven't put your hand up, you won't be getting lunch. Question, though, before I come to Alex. One of the things we were hearing about there, particularly about vans, is the extent to which they're not corporately owned. That we're talking about individual drivers, maybe self-employed folks. Very different setup to the railway, where you've got a limited number of companies, quite a few I recognise, but limited number of companies. How does that map across to the world we're wrestling with here on the roads?
We have a huge road risk profile. So everything from replacement buses for passengers, taxis to train crew, a huge supply chain, which is enormous, covering every point of the UK. So we were talking earlier on, Network Rail has 10,000 vehicles in its fleet alone. But if you add up all the road vehicles that are used for work purposes, it probably exceeds over 80,000 vehicles. And we have no idea what they're doing. We just touched on it earlier about Stat 19 and the relationship between the HSE and the Department of Transport and the Traffic Act. But it's a massive problem, and I make no bounds about it. We've made great strides, but I want to learn and share today about how we're approaching it, but we've got a long way to go yet. We really do.
Okay. Alex, so we heard a little bit briefly about the challenge coming along with misconceptions perhaps about automated driving and the idea, frankly terrifying idea, of 16-year-olds driving trucks. But the automated vehicle, I mean, it's going to take these problems away, isn't it?
I should say I teach engineers regulation. I'm emphatically not an engineer or a technician myself, so I'm going to dodge that question immediately, lawyer style. And I think also a point to make, automated vehicles are much talked about at the moment because it's a very newsworthy topic. But of course, the ecosystem of transport involves a great deal more, and importantly, the other categories which we're addressing ourselves to today are extant technologies today. I thought in Heather's talk and in the previous talk about RIDDLE not including road traffic accidents as a reportable risk. I mean, two very urgent truths came out. First of all, Heather talking about motorcycles and mopeds being an unquantifiable group. That's aggravated by the fact that e-scooters are classified as motorcycles and mopeds. And of course, e-scooters still aren't on a statutory footing beyond mandated trials. Secondly, e-bikes are, as Heather said, very much within the delivery ecosystem and increasing. And I don't know how many in the room are aware of this, that DFT is currently consulting on increasing the power and the removing the pedal assistance requirement. And that's a consultation that closes on the 25th of April. Now, if that happens, that's effectively going to introduce a vehicle onto the streets which is completely unregulated in terms of compulsory insurance and other requirements. That is a huge step. If that consultation follows through, it will introduce by secondary legislation a completely uninsured third-party form of vehicle. And I suspect those of us who move around in this city and elsewhere will have noticed just how many of these bikes go past us with the rider not pedalling at all. That is not a legal e-bike now, but it could become one. So the infrastructure is huge. Very glad to talk about automated vehicles and all of that, but there are two quite missing components at the moment. The first one is that regulation for e-bikes and e-scooters. The second one has already been mentioned. It's the Road Safety Investigation Branch.
Thank you very much. Kate, what's your sense of the legislative position, but more generally, I guess, some reflections on what you've been hearing this morning?
I think I'm going to speak a little bit later in my sort of work context, but my day job is the sort of the interface of where the human factors meets the infrastructure. So what are we doing as designers and network managers, and that's the infrastructure on which these people are driving. And the autonomy doesn't concern me as much as the driver assistance technology. That the interim technology, I did a psychology degree a few years ago because civil engineering degree didn't inform human factors understanding very well. Psychology degree did, and I specifically looked at the sort of this interface and the tendency of people to reduce their attention when the vehicle's doing more of the task. We think of it, the vehicle's doing 20% of the task, you can do the remaining 80% better. What actually happens is the human only does 60% of the task because they kind of think the vehicle's doing more. So second guessing what the technology will do and using that to reduce your own attention, consciously or unconsciously. So in design and network management, I'm trying to second guess what will the fleet that we have look like? What do unassisted drivers do in the context of assisted drivers? Will people pull out of into a smaller gap at a T-junction? Will the highly automated vehicle, which is the minority of the fleet, wait a ridiculously long time to turn because it will be insured by the manufacturer, not the driver when it's vehicle control? That vehicle there will then be driven around by humans, frustrated by the hour it will take to get out into a busy junction. The law-abiding or assisted vehicle being undertaken by the non-law-abiding unassisted vehicle. The mixed fleet is the problem, and I don't think we think about that enough in policy terms or infrastructure terms.
Is that something you're hearing being discussed? Because we've got the automated vehicles bill going through Parliament at the moment. Is that something you think you're hearing enough about in the debate?
No, I hear a lot of what can a vehicle do. I don't hear enough, not what a vehicle can do, what will a human do in the face of that vehicle, and a human in another vehicle do in the face of that vehicle. That interface, that for me, that's the psychology gap that I don't hear discussed really at all in design and network management.
Fair enough, we'll come back to that. Jonathan, I want to follow through on a point here, because one of the things you talked about in the safe system, I hope everyone had the same definition, by the way, we will be checking, the safer vehicle. One of the things that I guess puzzles me is a company, I'm not going to name them, but you might associate them with Sweden. Legendary for their commitment to safer vehicle, to seat belts. gift us the Polestar with a 0 to 60 time of all the things that one could do to make a vehicle safer. I would have thought not accelerating like shit off a shovel would be one of them. And yet we seem to be obsessed with driver assistance, things that go beep, which frankly just annoy me. Thinking again, looking at it from where you are with that global perspective, do you think we're getting the concept of what a safer vehicle should be right?
In a nutshell, no. I think we have part of it correct in terms of how manufacturers are seeming to respond to consumer demand for safety, that it has become more of a standard feature of vehicles, that safety is a sellable component rather than something that is only an optional extra. You know, you can have the 10-speaker stereo as standard, but if you want an airbag, you've got to pay extra, for example. That we're past that, thankfully. But I do believe that there is still an obsession with performance and an obsession with speed that is, frankly, confusing. Why does a speedometer? Okay, I live in Germany, so it's a little different with the autobahns, but that's.
Is that why you live there?
No, but certainly have seen some horrifying things there. But why, for example, does a vehicle have a speedometer that goes up to 300 kilometers per hour when the speed limit is 100? That very fact alone, to me, says that, and interestingly, go to that German example, the wording for the Autobahn is you can drive as fast as your vehicle allows you. So, that may be the reason for having a speedometer that says this is that as an artifact, and that's perhaps something that we need to change that perception in the first place. I saw a fantastic picture on social media about what a father had done to the car of his teenage daughter. And he put a paper insert on the dash that basically replaced the speedometer. Everything from 50 miles per hour was blanked out. In other words, this is the portion of your speedometer that under no circumstances are you allowed to access. And it sends, I think it sends a proper message that that it doesn't matter what your vehicle can do. It's what's not just what is legal, but what is safe.
Absolutely.
Volvo. I said the company. I should have. Volvo is interesting as an example because they actually, as a company, investigate internally every single crash in Sweden that occurs in one of their vehicles. So they do essentially have that internal safety culture that exists within their organisation, and perhaps it would be good to start holding companies accountable. If you say you have a safety culture, if you talk about safety as your primary what you're most known for in the market, then why do you send such mixed messages in these sort of dimensions?
Sure. There is an opportunity, by the way, if people have got points they want to flag particularly or questions they want to raise to do so. I'm reliant on PACTS colleagues to tell me if somebody's mailed anything in to tell me. So I'm going to come back to Tavid in a sec. Well, I'm going to come back to you because I've just had this rather horrific image born of the video we've seen of someone driving an extremely fast train but taking calls on a mobile phone. And I don't think they are allowed to do that on the railway.
No, that's a really good example because we have quite extensive systems and risk controls in place. And I often ask the question about, hang on, if you've got a driver who's on a train who's driving passengers, why can't we export the same sort of controls to somebody who's driving passengers on the highway? So things like drug and alcohol testing, medical assessments, all these things are standard for those who are we just don't seem to have that culture.
So you pose the question, what's the answer you get? Because surely the answer should be, great point, Tavid, let's do it.
We've covered some of them today. There's just, part of it for me is just the confusion. I'm a health and safety expert. When I landed it with road safety on my plate some 10 years ago, like most safety professionals, I turn around and go, what the hell's it got to do with health and safety? I'm a convert, I totally am, and I spent the last 10 years working with National Highways, Simon Turner's here somewhere, in introducing safety management techniques into road safety, and they're two very different areas. But we are disconnected, and not just with the health and safety. Obviously I have the ORR, which is my statutory authority, but the Traffic Act does have clauses. It has for cause and permit areas in there that does allow the police, if they are investigating and there's systemic failure, to pass that over to the HSE. But unfortunately it's not exercised perhaps in the way that it should be. We talked today about this step 19, the fact that they don't capture information which would absolutely help us to get into this. But it's because we are all drivers. It's one of those areas where we just take it for granted. It's something we all do. But when you put your work hat on, suddenly there's a whole change required. And it's not just behaviours of drivers. It's actually more to do with the changes in behaviours of managers and the leadership. That's where we'll really see change, if we can get inside that area.
I'm going to want to follow up on that, but I saw a hand go up here, so say who you are, please.
I'm Senior Road Safety Strategy Manager in TfL. I had a question largely for Alex, but also for the rest of the panel, which is that you mentioned kind of two key legal challenges. We've been talking very much about kind of traditional road safety models where you have a company, you have lots of vehicles in the fleet, you have direct control. Do you think that one of the kind of legal challenges we need to tackle is, with the growth of the home delivery economy, making it clearer what those rights and responsibilities are and how far you can go before you change the status of a worker? Or do we think that the legislation is clear but companies aren't applying it yet?
There are a number of regulatory pieces in play there. Just taking a sort of very panoramic view, first of all, I think there's an awful lot in the point that because cars were probably the consumer item of the early 20th century, they're that sort of smartphone type of technology that is suddenly acquired en masse at an incredible rate from the early 1900s. I think because of that, the regulatory approach is very light from the start, and that persists. When I was writing the book, that was the book plug that my publisher wanted me to give to, by the way. When I was writing the book, one of the bits that took the longest was trying to nail down the legal status of industry standards. And in the end, I rather concluded that they don't exist for legal reasons. They exist for commercial standardization reasons. And that's a good illustration. And that's why I think traffic regulation is light. Sort of zooming in from the panoramic a little bit, you then have other things in play. And one of the main things that's in play is employers' liability laws, both civil and public law, and occasionally criminal within public law. And that brings in a host of things, but there are some striking parallels. So, for example, this might be coincidence, it might be conscious, I think it might be coincidence, but the Automated and Electric Vehicles Act Part 2 bears several resemblances to the Employers' Liability Defective Equipment Act 1969. They both do the same thing. They both shift liability for product liability. So you can start to see similar solutions coming in. I think when we're talking about work vehicles, both of those aspects come in. But the problem is that ultimately the question turns on who is the victim, who is injured. Is it the employee, in which case they're owed certain duties, regulatory and civil, or is it a member of the public? And this is something that gig economy, e-bikes, micro-mobility vehicles, they are going to be the latest thing that accentuates that sort of problem. And this is why this proposal to increase the power and allow twist and go, remove pedal assistance, which up until now has been an essential element of keeping the bicycle definition and therefore being exempt from all the insurance responsibilities. This is why that is absolutely crucial. I'm at a stage, because I'm appearing, because I'm being briefed in matters and I'm lecturing and stuff, that I'm now at the stage where I say to people, please, please, please respond to this consultation. It's only open until the 25th of April, so that really is, I think, the most immediate and important thing that's happening in law. I'm afraid it's a very woolly answer, which basically says there are a lot of moving parts, but those are the key ones. Yeah, I hope, does that help? Yeah, good.
And you threw the question to the panel generally. I was going to come to Jonathan, but before I do, Alex, there was a passing reference there. I caught it, I don't know whether everyone did, to a book of some sort, if people
Bless you. This is all so accidental.
Well, since you've made a mention, I should mention it.
So I know Nick Reed is in the audience. He was extremely lovely about the book over the weekend. So I've just written the first legal textbook on advanced automated and electric vehicle law. It's done partly as a matter of personal obsession, but also because I teach regulation to postgraduate engineers at Imperial. And I couldn't see any book that actually dealt with transport regulation as a whole. Can I just very briefly say this on investigation branch and safety branch? One of the very particular things about the automated vehicles bill, and those of you who've seen it, which I suspect is many of you, is you will see within it, in statutory inspectors, something that looks almost precisely like a rail accident investigation branch, or an aviation investigation branch, or a marine investigation branch. One of the oddities of the bill, and it's not because the law commissions didn't try to press this button, they did, but one of the oddities of this bill, which I should say I completely commend as a bill, and it should not be held back, it should be enacted. But the next question is then going to be, where's the transport bill that introduces that generally? Because that absolutely is needed, and it is particularly needed because of the point that's been made about ADAS systems. The automated bill does not apply to ADAS systems. It has a passing reference to amending type approval legislation for ADAS systems, but other than that, it ignores them. That is an absolutely obvious omission. This bill needs to be enacted, but then whichever government it is needs to take up the next transport bill that was promised some time ago.
Which we'll be pressing them on, and hopefully everyone else will in this room as well. Thank you. Jonathan, the legal liability question, the employer's liability, I mean, is this something that comes up in your perspective when you're looking at this globally? Are other places wrestling with what's the employer actually on the hook for?
I mean, so like I mentioned when I talked before, the consultations with different stakeholders that I had, they did summarise a universal problem. This is not a limitation. This is not just a gap for the United Kingdom. That there is this universal scenario where it is clear that health and safety authorities do have a legal responsibility to be involved, to investigate, but it is one that is deferred to road safety authorities, and willingly, I might add. Road safety authorities are, I think, partly complicit in this situation that they have willingly taken this on. So I think it is ripe. It's a ripe opportunity for a leader. I'm gonna highlight the opportunity for Great Britain to be great and demonstrate a level of global leadership here to demonstrate a change that is possible. This is not even a change that requires a different new legislation. It just requires, I think, a full consideration of the existing legislation and simultaneously a belief in the benefits that having a road safety authority and a health and safety authority supported by the police can only result in the type of investigation and the type of recommendations that we can all act on to make our roads ultimately safer.
And harking back to a conversation we had earlier, I'm just wondering, thinking about the sort of this leadership position, this sort of where has someone stood up in a country and said, right, I've had enough of this. Could you just list maybe the top 5, 6 examples?
If only there were six examples. We talk about leadership in road safety spaces primarily because it's as rare as hen's teeth, and unfortunately, at the type of levels of government necessary to enact real change. Because, like I said, the very first principle of safe systems is that human life is the highest priority, and to have a highest priority, it often means that you have to sacrifice all of the other highest priorities that might exist in an agenda. One of the only scenarios where we've had such leadership is actually President Chirac from France back in the early 2000s, where as part of his second term in office, he said road safety is going to be my highest priority, and enacted the kind of measures that within, I can't remember if it was within 1 year or within 2 years, reduced deaths by 40%. Sorry?
Just only on speed.
Predominantly focused on speed, but also on alcohol as well, on drink-drive prevention. And so in a very, very short period of time achieved quite a staggering reduction. But key to that is that once you stop that kind of attention, once you stop the intensity of that kind of implementation, if you reduce the enforcement, these are unfortunately behaviours and therefore consequences that do return. So not only do we need that kind of leadership, but it is something that does require perpetuity and ongoing commitment.
Kate, I'm interested here. It's very, I would say it's very easy for me to think about the world in terms of engineering, fixing vehicles, regulation, saying what people should do, must do, but what you said was, I paraphrase here, but this is a people problem. So if it's a people problem, we could change our regulations, we could announce this is now a health and safety issue, but unless the people's attitude changes, nothing's actually going to change. So do you have a sense of what might make that happen? What might make the employer side of this picture different to the one we're experiencing now?
I think you need a bit like in the same way we talk about enforcement and communication with the public, you need the carrot bit and the stick bit. It's too easy to see it as you just need a stick to management employment. But if you can unveil the carrot bit of it, if your culture is that you value your staff and your reputation and your commercial benefit from not having injuries, either your staff being injured or the public being injured. I thought the figures were really stark about actually it's not just the people at work being injured, it's all the other people. I have to say the scale of that I really hadn't appreciated. Yeah. If you start having the right culture, whether it's thinking about you as a driver as an individual or as an employer or a manager within an employer, you see the incentive from a carrot point of view, if you have the right culture about looking after people, there's a bit of data karma comes back to you because you'll get the right outcomes. Remember, the Health and Safety at Work Act showed that all of the regulations and the quantified minutiae of control, you know, the Factories Act, you have a guard on your equipment, didn't really do very much to reduce injuries. You've had thousands of people a year killed in the UK, and that's down to 150 a year, I think, in workplaces now, including driving. And that happened because culture changed. The overarching principle of you need to do whatever's necessary to keep people safe, rather than you must have a guard on your machinery, we need the employment equivalent of that. And that's what, you know, what we have, which I'll explain a little bit later, of you need to have the culture. All organisations say, pretty much, I've never heard anyone say the opposite, our staff are our greatest asset. Have a look at their policy and their practice, and you'll see whether that's true.
Absolutely.
You know, that's the test. And you see if people have the understanding, and sometimes it is actually, it's only organisations that have been investigated. I'd like to be known just for road safety management. Unfortunately, I'm probably better known nationally for being a construction widow whose husband was killed in the highway, not in a road traffic collision. But having been through that HSE experience of seeing, you know, I was interviewed under caution. I wasn't even involved, but because I was the space, and employed by the company. When you've actually seen that side of it, you do see a different side of what happens when things go wrong. I mean, the irony there was no organisational fault. It was genuinely an accident, as distinct from an incident that could have been prevented in a simplistic sense. But I think if you have experience of that, it changes your culture and your behaviour. And as a company, our biggest culture change happened when we had 15 staff in a meeting in Texas on the site of an oil refinery. They weren't there as a result of they just happened to be using a cabin that was available. And we had 15 staff killed in one incident when the Texas oil refinery explosion happened. And it changed our culture spectacularly. You know, everything changed. The entire company, 80,000 staff worldwide, all went through a behavioural safety intervention. And my husband's video, Kate's story, which is on YouTube, we've used that for that you know, that ongoing. Every single member of staff who joins the company goes through that induction. One of my staff joined me, and she went on the induction process, and she came back and she said, she looked really shell-shocked. She said, we're actually serious about safety. You know, she'd never actually worked in an organisation where that was the case. She was never allowed to have PPE in her previous organisation because she didn't have a cost code to charge it to. She was never allowed to stay overnight after a road safety audit, driving home at 1 or 2 in the morning. She was expected to drive home. We wouldn't allow her to drive home. We would provide her. She said, the company will pay for it. Of course we will. That's where culture shows.
Absolutely. Right, we've got two more questions for the panel. So, Saul, I saw your hand up. We're going to go here first.
So I've got a question from Edward Barry from SMUK, and he asks, is there a legal requirement for HGV operators to complete their own internal investigation following incidents involving their vehicles?
That sounds like a legal question to me.
I think I'd also defer to Kate on this. I suspect it's probably, as per the previous answer, what the context is, because if it's an employment situation, then that will trigger regulatory requirements that might not be triggered if it's an employee driving the vehicle at the weekend, for example. But I don't know.
Yeah, the HSE, I was quite surprised at how their approach of what they do and don't investigate.
Yeah.
Because these grey areas that Heather explained really well, you have a legal requirement to have a risk management system in place. If that's not evident in the initial investigation, I would expect that would become part of that. But I'm shocked how few fatal collisions result in proceedings.
Exactly.
And there was an event which James' predecessor, David Davis, arranged at the DFT, where we asked that question: what organisational change do we need to change that investigation? And the police organisations said most fatalities could result in proceedings, but don't, because the telemetry, which is available on the vehicle, is not disclosed by the manufacturers. So for me, that's a really big gap. The information is there, but it's not available to the people who need it. The manufacturer can access that data.
Not readily available.
Yeah.
I suspect that's something we're going to come back to with Richard shortly, broadly speaking.
I just
Alex,
wanted to add to that answer briefly. If one's talking about legal requirements, there might be other requirements that are legal in nature outside regulation. So, for example, a company's duty to cooperate with their insurance company as a matter of insurance contract would probably include some reporting and investigation requirements.
One of the complexities here, of course, is that the fact that an HGV is involved in a crash doesn't mean the HGV driver caused the crash. The existence of a particularly heavy vehicle has a tendency to make any crash worse. And that's one of the things. Plus, of course, an awful lot of those vehicles on our roads aren't UK registered at all and aren't being driven by UK drivers. You look like you're bursting to say something, Jonathan, but I'm keen we get Saul in before we break for coffee. So, very briefly.
Just very, like you said, just I thought it was important to add. You talked about a driver who caused a crash. Under safe systems, it's very important to note this notion that no one single factor causes not a crash but a death or a serious injury. This is one of the reasons why I liked Mark's video so much, because it looked at a serious injury event through a safe systems lens. So what was the contribution from the vehicle, from the behaviour, from the infrastructure? And that's how every single event should be looked at, because it gives such a wealth of information in terms of any one of those elements could be something to act on in order to prevent this from occurring in the first place. If you only look at speed, for example, then the information or the avenues available for making recommendations for actions just becomes so much narrower. It always has to be examined from that safe systems lens or that safe systems view.
Of course, and I think for any of the events that we help host here or run ourselves, I like to think people will take a fresh thought, an action, and make a connection. And if there is one action that you might like to have a think about coming away from this, it will be to share with your colleagues the link to that video, which I think is going to be up on Thursday.
Can I make a quick point there? Because
yes, and then Saul, who will literally burst with excitement.
Jen was due to come today, who's the Deputy Director of the R. Unfortunately, she's not very well today, and I'm sure if she had been here today, she would have mentioned the renowned incident 2013 when two welders driving home drove into the back of a PACTS HGV. That was actually prosecuted by the ORR, which seems quite strange when you run the railway. But I guess this is the other thing I want to mention about the new road safety investigation branches, which when the RAID do an investigation for the railway, they take their findings to the ORR. And it's the ORR with their authority behind it as the regulator that allow those regulations or those recommendations to be addressed. My question about the new road safety investigation branch, even if they do get involved with investigations, is who's going to regulate? Who do they take their outputs to, and who will take responsibility then for actually making sure those recommendations get implemented? Because I worry about the HSE, not horribly, but I do worry about the whole thing around regular. We did some, one of Simon's colleagues and Anne-Marie Penny and I did some research, and we looked at all the HSE work-related fatalities in a given year. Work-related road driving fatalities, when you include all the pedestrians, the road public, twice the number of deaths than the total number of workforce fatalities. Now, I think part of the reason the HSE don't want to get involved is they'd just be swamped. They would literally just be unable to handle the sheer number of issues to deal with. So I think that's part of the issue as to why. But we need something.
Right, hold that thought. Alex was keen to get in, but he can't because we're going to go to Saul.
Saul. I feel bad about asking a question now.
Keep it short.
It kind of plugs into everything that everyone else has been saying. So we've got the Corporate Manslaughter Act, the Health and Safety at Work Act, and the regulations there under Section 2 and 3. So the first bit of question, sorry Steve, the first bit of question is who do we need to reach to actually get those bits of legislation being implemented properly? Because the legislation is there. It's not that we don't have the legislation, it's that we're not using it. And the second bit is whether it would be useful to have legislation on Heather's problem of we don't know the extent of how many people are, driving scooters for work and this, that, and the other, of saying, okay, if you want to run an insurance company in the UK, you have to report how many miles a year are people recording as being driven on business. If you want to have a limited company in the UK, you have to say how many miles are being driven on business by your employees. And those kind of things could fairly easily give us, a whole load of data to see how big the problem is, but also focus people's attention on the issue.
So taking that first one, we've got the regulation, we've got the framework, but nobody is enforcing it. Who should that be? Which I think is a similar point to the one you're making. I'm very pleased that Alex was gagging to get in a moment ago. So I'm assuming, Alex, if you could just answer this for us.
On the who would my regulator be, I see the point. Under the AV bill, the proposal is essentially that there be an in-use regulator for automated vehicles. So just on the AV bill model, which gives the accident investigation branch for automated vehicles, the proposal is a bespoke regulator. Of course, that begs the question, well, who would the regulator be if it was expanded out to road traffic more generally in a future transport bill, to which I suspect the answer is, well, it's turtles all the way down. We need one more regulator. I don't know, unless anybody else does, of any suggestion that the HSE warmly take up that invitation. I get the impression that that is certainly not the case. But I mean, from my perspective, I think we are inexorably, or we ought inexorably to be heading towards a road traffic regulator at some stage. Now, whether that happens more broadly and in a future iteration that incorporates an automated vehicle regulator is another question. The point that Kate makes, there's no way we don't end up with a mixed fleet of vehicles. There are horses in every city. City of London police ride their horses through Temple every week, which is one of the great sights of working in Temple. But you are always going to have a mixed fleet. So for my part, I'd say single road traffic, but I'm conscious that I and many other people are asking for something that we don't yet have.
Now, one of the improvement we definitely need is an improvement in chairmanship of events like this, because we're running slightly behind. So whereas the agenda says there'll be some sort of, reflections on session learning, we haven't got time for that, I'm really sorry, because we need to get to the tea and coffee before it gets closed. So I will just say my reflection is we've had excellent views from the panel, interesting thoughts from the floor.